हेलो फ्रेंड्स, केजी क्लासेस में आपका स्वागत है। आज हम आपको अलेक्जेंडर पॉप की लाइफ के बारे में बताएंगे। इनका जन्म है 1688 टू 1744 मृत्यु है। अलेक्जेंडर पॉप वाज बोर्न इन लैम्बार्ड स्ट्रीट ऑन May 21st, 1688. He was brought up in the Roman Catholic faith. His father was a linen merchant who married as his second wife Edith Turner, lady of respectable Yorkshire family and of some fortune, made a competence and retired to a small property at Binfield near Windsor. On account of his religion, young Pop was denied the privilege of education at a first-class school. What his studies nature did match to supplement the desultory schooling be received at the hands of local priests and tutors. A severe illness when he was still young undermined his health, and he developed a physical deformity. These infirmities allied to his susceptible temperament made his life one long disease. Though never a profound or accurate scholar, he had a good knowledge of Latin and a working acquaintance with Greek. By 1704, he had written a good deal of verse, which attracted the attention of Wycherley, who introduced him to town life and to other men of letters. In 1709, his pastorals were published in Tonson's Miscellany, and 2 years later the essay on criticism appeared and was praised by Addison in The Spectator. The Rape of the Lock, a brilliant satire on the fashionable life of his time, in the following year only enhanced his reputation, and he was soon regarded as the leading poet of the time. It won him a connection with the chief literary figures of the age, Gay, Swift, Steele, Addison, and Congreve, and he became a member of the Scribblers' Club. Pop's industry was untiring, and his literary output almost continued until his death. In 1713, Windsor Forest and Temple of Fame appeared, and in 1715 the translation of the Iliad was begun, and the work was published at intervals between the years, and 1720. It won enormous popularity and brought the poet 5,000. It was followed by Odyssey, Odyssey 1725 to 26, in which he had the assistance of Brome and Fenton, who, especially the former, caught his style so exactly as almost to defy identification. The translation was really popular and increased Pop gains to about 8,000, which placed him in a position of economic independence. The year 1725 was to see the beginning of that period in Pop's career, which was to make him famous as a moralist and a satirist. He prepared his famous attack on Grove Street, and in May 1728 appeared the Dunciad, a heroic poem in 3 books. In this book, with savage fury, Pop lashed at the small wits and poetasters and those who had injured him. Theobald became the central dunce, around whom circled like satellites round the planet, some 100 others contemporary dons. The book, of course, created a sensation, but so brilliant was the style, so ill-feigned the maliciousness, that the Grave Street hacks were immortalized rather than extinguished by Pope's satirical wit. Between 1731 to 1735, he produced his epistle, the last of which, addressed to Arbuthnot, is also known as the prologue to the satire, and contains his ungrateful characterization of Addison under the name of Atticus, and also the essay on man 1733, written under the influence of Bolingbroke. This poem was intended to form part of a series of philosophic poems in which human nature was to be surveyed systematically. The satires collected under the title of Imitations of Horace were published between the years 1733 and 1738, and these marked the close of Pope's poetical career. A natural, delicate constitution, a deformed body, extreme sensitiveness over excitement and overwork did not promise a long life, and Pope died on May 30, 1744, aged 56. Brief summary. Canto 1st. The poet begins his poem with the invocation of the goddess of poetry. He is surprised to find a gentle lady, Belinda, getting so much offended at a trivial thing like the cutting of a lock by a gentleman like Lord Peter. However, it is on the advice of request of his friend John Carroll that he is writing this poem, which he hopes will be admired by Belinda herself. Belinda dreamed a young man in courtly clothes. It was Ariel. He told her that ladies of her ilk are always guarded and looked after by spirits or sylphs, so that their chastity may be protected from the foolish mortals. These sylphs are not bound by laws of the earth. They can change their shape and sex at their own will. Some of the spirits are gnomes, since they belong to the earth. The others are Aries, flying in the air, and some others are spirits of the sea. These sylphs were preciously beautiful women, but after their death they have been changed into spirits according to activities and impairment in their previous earthly lives. The Ariel warns her that some calamity is to befall her. Therefore, she should be very careful in all her affairs, especially of the adventure of. As soon as the spirit departed, Belinda opened her eyes and found a love letter in which she read the avowal confession of a passionate lover. She was so charmed by the letter that she forgot all about the dream and the warning she had received from Ariel. She got up from the bed and dressed at the toilet table. Her dressing table was loaded with costly ornaments, powders, pulps, rugs, hairpins, perfumes, and other articles of toilet. It appears to be an altar of a goddess of beauty. Her maid Betty decorated and painted her, and Betty was fully armed to conquer her lover. The sylphs also took a keen interest in her decoration. They arranged the fold of her dress, adjusted her hair and set her head at the correct angle. Canto 2nd. With this decoration and toilet work, she sailed on the river Thames. In a well-burnished barge, she looked even more beautiful and bright than the early morning sun. A host of Buick's men and Ballast women surrounded her, but she was the heroine among them, the commanders-in-chief of the army of beauties. She smiled at all her lovers equally, showing greater favor of none. She rejected their advances so beautifully that nobody felt offended. She was a perfect beauty. Everything of hers was gay and charming, but the most attractive of all her beautiful things were her two locks. A baron named Lord Peter got enamored of them. He wanted to possess them by hook or crook, so he worshipped the god of love early in the morning. For his worship he also made an altar of 12 vast French romances on which he burnt the letters of his precious beloved as an offering to the beloved god. He prayed to him to grant him victory in his battle for winning Belinda's lock and to keep them in his possession forever. The heavens granted only the first half of his prayer, while the other half could not be heard by the heavens as it had been dispersed by a gust of wind. Presently Belinda felt safe because all the spirits had been commanded by their commanders to guard her strongly. Some of them were put to hard task of looking after Belinda's petticoat. Although her petticoat was stuffed with hoops and armed with ribs of veils, yet every precaution was to be taken by these spirits to protect Belinda's chastity. Ariel, their master, warned these spirits sylphs that if any one of them neglected his duty, he would be severely punished. He may be imprisoned in some beer bottle. His wings may be clogged with gums. His body may be contracted by the use of alum coat, or he may be tortured like Lion by being tied to the wheel of the chocolate machine. As soon as Ariel finished speaking, the sylphs undertook their charges of duties entrusted to them and watched her in terror and confusion of the approaching event. Canto 3rd. Along with her companion, Belinda was sailing towards the Hampton Court on the banks of the river Thames. It was a splendid building where British statesmen often assembled to hold their consultation. Even Queen Anne graced some tea parties occasionally. Belinda then reached the court. She and her company began to talk on various matters. Some of them praised the British Queen, others praised a painted screen imported from India. There was a lot of howling, chatting and singing which went on till the afternoon. Belinda then desired to play the fashionable card game known as Ombre and challenged two of her companions to the game. She wanted to defeat them single-handed and thus gain name and fame. Sometimes fortune favored Belinda and sometimes her opponent, but finally the victory fell to her. She shouted with joy, and the walls of the building and the woods around echoed back her sound This time Belinda was extremely happy. She did not know that very soon she would curse that victorious day. The coffee time was nearing, the cups and spoons were being laid on the table, and hot, fragrant coffee was poured into the cup of the assembled lords and ladies. Coffee was the fashionable but very popular drinking of the day. It used to inspire Lord Peter with a clever plan to sever the lock of Belinda. One of the ladies, Clarissa, gave the Lord a seizure so that he may achieve his end. The spirits made their best efforts to protect Belinda from rape of her lock. They twinged, they touched her earrings 3 times to look back, undoing the attempts of the Lord. Ariel himself was sitting in her bosom. He found that she loved a human being. Therefore, when the Lord got himself closer to her, he flew away, leaving her alone. The spirit could not guard a lady who loved an earthly lover, so the Lord succeeded in raping the lock of Belinda. No sooner did Belinda know about this than she began to shriek. No lady could cry louder than she, even when a husband or a lapdog died. With pride and joy at his exploit, he felt that he had committed a brave deed and that his name and fame should live forever. He told Belinda that she should not feel grieved at the loss of her hair, for still Caesar's sword destroyed everything it could destroy, even the works of gods. Canto 4th. Belinda's anger and grief were immense. In fact, all her melancholy of anger was caused by a mischievous gone. Umbriel, he had been to the cave of spleen in the depth of the earth and had been granted by spleen the power of vex and envy Belinda. The goddess spleen was sleeping when he approached her. She was sighing with melancholy. She suffered from constant pains and headache. Two maid servants attended her. One was ill-natured, old and wrinkled. The other was affectionate, young and beautiful. A dark vapor flew constantly over the cave of spleen. Whenever this mist cleared, a little strange scenes and sights were visible. The goddess of spleen had changed people into strange shapes to teapots, jars, and goose pie. Some of them imagined that they were children, others fancied themselves to be bottles without corks. After passing through this assemblage, Umbriel went to the goddess and prayed to change Belinda's nature by making her melancholy and ill-natured. The goddess granted him his prayers. She gave him 2 caskets. One was full of melancholy, sighs, sobs, passion, and tears, and other was full of ill nature or anger. Umbriel, the gnome spirit of the earth, came to Belinda with these 2 caskets. He found that a woman named Thalestris was trying to console Belinda. He immediately opened the bag of anger over their heads. The result was that Belinda burned with more and more anger, and Thalestris further incited that. Thalestris spoke so loudly that her voice echoed in the walls and woods around. She sympathized with Belinda. She reminded her how many pains and troubles she had taken to nourish the lock, and how it had been snipped off her head in such a brutal manner. She told Belinda about the consequence of the rape of the lock. This rape, in her opinion, would bring her disgrace and dishonor, because the Baron will display it to others. Others will begin despising her. Nobody will drink to her health then this affair would scandalize her name. People would doubt her relation with Lord Peter. She would be the talk of the day and of the town. Every Tom, Dick and Harry would speak about her. Having expressed her resentment against the Baron and her sympathy for Belinda, she turned to her own lover, Sir Plum, and begged him to demand the lock from Lord Peter. Sir Plum, who was proud of his snuff box and his cane, requested the Baron to return the lock, but the Baron politely, though firmly, rejected his request. He told Sir Plum that the lock had been severed and could not decorate the fair head of Belinda ever again. He would keep the sacred lock with him as long as he lived, and would wear on his hands. Umbriel, the naughty gnome, did not want to end the affairs at this juncture yet, so he opened the other casket of melancholy over Belinda's head. As a result of this, Belinda began to curse the day her locks was cut off. She wished rather she had not come to the court of Hampton. It would have been better for her to remain all alone. How good it would have been had she been not in the company of these admirers and bukes. She cursed her beauty also. Several omens since that morning had indicated that some misfortune might befall her, but alas, she did not care for them. Even she forgot the dream. She would not have minded much if the Baron had robbed her of any other hair but that her favourite lock. She went on weeping and cursing in this way. Thanks, best of luck.